in the old days, before karaoke and Noraebang, we always sang after dinner.
Oh, really? Even despite not having those facilities?
Exactly. We sang on our own.
Oh, just like in a restaurant or a bar or something?
Anywhere.
Like we want to get up close and personal on Peters on the Block. Today we have a truly special guest. He is Professor Mark Peterson, one of America's leading scholars of Korean studies, an honorary professor at Brigham Young University, and the recipient of the Bogwan Order of Cultural Merit at this year's 579th Hangul Day commemoration ceremony. It's been nearly 60 years since he formed his connection with Korea, and he's often called the foreigner who understands Korea most deeply, and I'd have to agree with that. Could we have a one-line 인사말, Professor Peterson?
한 마리 말은 못해요. 난 말이 많은 사람이에요. 한 마리 못하는데.
For those who are still learning Korean, Professor Peterson would say you can't just say one thing. He's got a lot of things to say. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Professor.
Oh, my pleasure. And it's nice to see you again.
Yes, I think that was about, 18 months ago, maybe?
I can't keep track of time.
Me
but
neither.
At least,
at least that when we filmed like this Confucian special and we went down to Nonsan.
Yes.
And that was really amazing. You were explaining all about the place we were at and Confucianism during the Joseon dynasty.
It was a unique place that we went to. I've been to a lot of what are called Hangul, traditional schools, and so on, which are traditional private schools.
Yeah.
But this was something in between. It was a school designed to help the Yoon family candidates, children, young men, to take the exams. It was a beautiful setting.
Absolutely. So you're here in Korea this time around. You're based in the US, but you come often.
I come often. I just looked at my travel history from this year. I've been here 6 times this year. So,
this year alone?
Yeah, every other month.
Wow. And still going strong, Professor, because you've been here since what? If it's 60 years ago, that was the 1960s?
65.
Wow.
It's actually not quite 60 years.
Okay, almost.
It's 59 years, 360 days.
Oh, wow, 5 days.
5 days, it'll be my 60th anniversary.
Will you still be here then?
No, I'm going home tomorrow. Home tomorrow.
Okay, that's amazing. So you came here and you recently received as well the Bogwan Order of Cultural Merit at the Hangul Day commemoration ceremony.
That was so wonderful.
So can you tell us what is this award? What does it mean?
It's a medal. It's a major medal.
Yeah.
I was the only one that day to receive the medal. Others got pins as thank you, but I got a full around the neck, beautiful gold medal. Yeah. And I was talking to a friend of mine that does legal work, and he told me that if I ever get into legal trouble, because of this medal, they're going to drop the charge 1 level.
Oh, wow. That's a benefit of having this medal.
Yes.
Drop it 1 level.
Yes. So if I kill somebody, it'll drop it to mandatory manslaughter instead.
Yes. Wow. Okay. So if you were thinking of committing a crime, which of course.
But that's funny because, a medal awardee would probably not commit any crimes at all.
Of course.
But it was a major deal.
Yeah.
It was just a wonderful day. And the medal was signed by the president and awarded by the prime minister. So it was a beautiful day.
And so that's for your whole body of work over 60 years.
Basically, because it was Hangulal, they were emphasizing the work I've done on teaching Hangul, in other words, teaching Korean. And that was the main thrust, but it also mentioned the YouTube channel that I do and the education and all those things I've done.
So for our listeners out there, if you want to check out Professor Peterson's body of work, a lot of it is on the YouTube site, The Frog Outside the Well. 167,000 subscribers. Wow. And so on here, is it mostly in English or a bit of both?
Mixed. It's mixed. But every video, 99% of the videos have dual subtitles.
Oh, nice.
So if you're listening in English, you can follow along in Korean. If you're listening in Korean, you can follow in English. And it's about half and half. I haven't tabulated it, but it's about half and half. Half in Korean, half in English.
Fantastic. And then what's the main topic on there? Is it all things Korea?
Basically, I don't do modern politics very much. It's mostly historic and literary and linguistic. I do a lot on Korean language learning, as well as literature, as well as history, and sometimes cultural things in general.
Fantastic. Since 1965, you must have been here then. I'm guessing you haven't counted, but hundreds, if not thousands of times?
Maybe not thousands, but I've calculated once several years ago that I've crossed the Pacific 150 times.
Wow.
So I'm not sure what it is now, maybe 170 or something.
Goodness gracious. So what brought you here in the first place, and what was it like? How much has it changed over the decades?
Every now and again, I look at Korea with my 1965 eyes, and I see things that just are mind-boggling.
Yeah.
It was so different. I came in November of 1965. Yeah. And this country was desperately poor then. Per capita income was $125 per year.
Wow.
Imagine, how desperately poor that was. There were beggars all over. There was petty theft all over. Oh, pickpockets by the dozens on the bus and such. You had to be careful.
Yeah.
And, people said, we're so poor, we have so many petty crime these days. And I thought, no, crime's crime, and, it doesn't make a difference. It has made a difference, because when you're desperately poor, people have to eat and live.
Yeah.
And petty crime, any crime today in Korea is almost non-existent.
Yeah, almost unheard of. And that's one thing I sometimes take for granted now. I've been here for so long. But when I go back to the UK, I always suddenly have my radar switch on and I'm like, okay, be careful here.
Be careful, yeah. In Korea, it's no be careful.
No,
you're
fine.
Yeah, all the time.
Oh, that is such an interesting difference that I'm guessing not many foreigners will have personal first-hand experience of.
Well, I hate to think about it, but, I every now and again I realize I'm a living fossil.
That's a brilliant thing from a professor's standpoint, surely, being able to see all those changes.
I've lived through a lot of things. My second iteration, the second time I was living in Korea, was the time that Park Chung-hee was assassinated.
Oh, wow.
And I witnessed his funeral carriage go by from my home. Goodness. I could see it from up on the hill, way down below. I could see the carriage go by.
Unbelievable.
And so I've seen the Chunduhwan, Gwangju uprising. I've been through a lot of history in the last 60 years in Korea.
And that's given you this amazing, unique insight, I'm sure, into it. And so because 1965, like you said, really desperately poor, I think after the Korean War, one of, if not the poorest country in the world.
It was. There were no countries that were poorer. There were some countries that were equally poor, but it was truly the poorest country in the world.
Yeah.
But, I was talking to someone the other day, and I said something that surprised even me, and that is, the country was poor, but the people were not.
What does that mean?
There was a light in their eyes and a hope in their heart and their behavior that things were going to get better.
Oh, you could feel that.
Yeah. Oh, you could definitely feel it.
Yeah.
And this poverty, there was a sense that this was not right. That things had been better before.
Yeah.
And through the Japanese occupation and the wars, things had been ruined. But Korea had this great self-esteem that we're going to do it again. Yeah. We're going to get better, and things are going to get better in the future. So, there was a great hope in the air, in spite of the obvious despair. Yeah. Imagine those two things were operating at the same time. The visual despair of what you saw, but the insubstantiated hope that people could feel.
Oh, wow. That's not something I've heard often. That statistic is often bandied about. Korea was the poorest country in the world and it developed so rapidly. But hearing that you could feel the hope, it was like tangible there, is really interesting. And so, to the next question, I guess that might be one of the answers. what is the secret behind Korea's unbelievably rapid rise? That must play a big role, that there was that hope.
Yeah. Well, the secret is the drive for education, which sometimes these days they say is overplayed. We talk about the education fever.
Yes.
And the drive to succeed in the exam. Just a few days ago, we had the exam.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. I've been looking at the idea of education fever, and it's not 60, 80 years old.
Yeah.
We think of the education fever in Korea as developing after liberation, after the war. But no, I've been doing studies lately that show the education drive in Korea goes back 1,000 years.
Oh, wow.
Literally, to the beginning of the Korea dynasty. Because it was then that Korea adopted the examination system. And the examination system was dependent on education.
For the public officials.
For public officials. And this was extremely important because if you compare it to Japan and to Europe, the warrior was in charge of the society for centuries.
Yeah.
But Korea turned the corner very early on. And by selecting the examination system, they borrowed it from China, but they did better than China.
Oh.
Because China would have external wars. The Mongols came in, the Manchus came in. The Chinese had their troubles. But Korea, for 1,000 years, they had their problems. The Mongols invaded, the Japanese invaded, but those were temporary things for Korea. It did not change the government. In China, the government was changed. And in Korea, the Koryo dynasty lasted 500 years. No failure. And the Joseon dynasty lasted for 500 years. And for that 1,000 years, the driving force to be somebody was to study, take the exam, and pass and get a government position.
Wow, so that's been around for not 60 or 80 years, 1,000 years.
1,000 years.
And yeah, I guess that's interesting because I think a lot of people know that through K-dramas and whatnot, that taking that test was the pinnacle and passing it, of course. But then we maybe don't link it to today's educational fever. But it is all one country.
It's all one thing,
Wow, that's a really intriguing insight. And so you studied East Asian studies at Harvard University?
At Harvard, yes.
Back then, I imagine there weren't many people doing that or that interested in Korea.
No, and there was no future in it.
Right.
Many in our class could not get an academic position. Some went into government, some went into selling used cars.
Oh, wow.
You know,
diverse.
But it wasn't a good prospect for finding a job. Today, it is. Today, you can get a position in Korean studies at almost any university, Korean language at least.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's grown tremendously. But in those days, no, I was walking the plank on a ship. I was walking off the board into the open sea.
How many people were in your class, like roughly?
5 or 6 or 7.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that few.
Yeah.
And so all because they had a personal interest in Korea?
See, I first came to Korea as a missionary.
Yeah.
But most of my class were Peace Corps volunteers.
Okay.
In fact, a lot of people think I was Peace Corps volunteer because all my classmates were.
Sure.
Yeah. But many of them were Peace Corps volunteers, and they, like me, had lived in Korea for a while, and we were thinking, like, we got hit by the truck. You know, what was this truck that ran over us? You know, what was this Korean experience, really? And so a lot of them wanted to study and to get into it, you know, historically or linguistically or literarily or whatever.
So were the professors there people who had had first-hand experience of Korea, the people who were teaching you?
Yes, they were sort of what I think of as the first generation. They were sort of the tail end of the first generation. The first generation probably goes back into 1900 with Homer Hulbert and James Garth Gale and some of these early, and the Underwoods, some of these early pioneers. But my teacher, Ed Wagner, was in the military group. And the professor at Columbia, another of the real pioneers was Gary Ledyard. He was in the military.
Oh, wow.
They both came to Korea during the military occupation before the Korean War.
Oh, before it. Wow.
Yeah, they were both in the post-World War II American government in Korea.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so that was really the tail end of the first generation. I consider myself in the second generation.
Yeah.
And the third generation today, maybe the fourth even, is mostly Kyopo, mostly Korean Americans.
Yeah.
Mostly Korean Americans who have grown up in Korea. Some grew up in America, and they're like, "What is this culture that my mother and father are driving at me all the time?" And they want to get into it. So the third, fourth generation are mostly Korean Americans.
Oh, interesting. This insight is really, really something that you cannot get unless we've got Professor Peterson on your show. So we're so lucky. Loads of questions already coming in. We'll get to those after a song requested from you, 사랑해, I Love You, from 1984. This song came out.
84?
Yeah, apparently.
I thought it came out in about 64.
Oh, maybe this is a remake version. I'm not sure.
Maybe.
Why did you choose this track?
Oh, I don't know. They just said name a folk song. And one reason I thought of this is in the old days, before karaoke and Noraebang, before these music where you go and sing.
Yeah.
We always sang after dinner.
Oh, really? Even despite not having those facilities?
Exactly. We sang on our own.
Oh, just like in a restaurant or a bar or something?
Anywhere.
Like wow.
At a home.
Really?
In a restaurant. If it's just 2 or 3 of you, you don't sing. But, if you have a party venue, and 6 or 8 or 10, or the office is there, or some association is there, and it's a nice dinner. At the end of the dinner, everybody had to sing a song.
Oh, wow, just to get up by themselves.
Yes.
Like you do at Noraebang, but without a mic and
without
speakers.
a mic and all this stuff. And you'd have to sing on your own.
Wow.
And for some reason, your favorite song was called your Shipalbon.
Yes, even back then.
Yes, your number 18.
Wow.
And so someone said, well, my number 18 is this or this. And different people had different ones that they could do.
Amazing.
My wife and I did one with 2-part harmony.
Oh, nice.
And it was so beautiful. It would melt your heart. It was a beautiful Ohio that we would sing when there were 2 of us together.
Wow.
But this 사랑해 당신을, this I Love You song is one of the songs you'd hear often.
I remember my auntie singing that. Now you say 사랑해 당신을.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
And it's got this great refrain of yeah, 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 yeah.
Wow, I do remember this from the 80s, I must admit. It's from Song Chang-sik and Yoon Hyung-ju and Kim Se-hwan, and we'll be back after that. On your YouTube channel, The Frog Outside the Well, why did you decide to use that Korean metaphor? What does that metaphor mean again?